This BBC book, with informative and entertaining text along with over 80 specially commissioned colour photographs, provides an additional perspective on the Queen and complements the programme, which is also available as a commemorative video.
The BBC presents the Olympic Games. The grace and power of the Winter Games, live from Albertville in France. The skaters, the skiers, striving for medals or just striving. The BBC, the best place to enjoy the Games. The Olympic Winter Games, starting Saturday, BBC One.
After the news, it's question time, and I can tell you there's no shortage of questions. Around the table, with as usual no advanced knowledge of the questions selected, will be the former Health Minister Edwina Currie, Patricia Hewitt, who was Neil Kinnock's press secretary at the last election, founder of the SDP and now Harvard professor Shirley Williams, and one of the top women in British business, Eve Newbold. An hour of lively debate not to be missed. Question time in half an hour on BBC One.
Now on One, the main evening news at 9:50 with Martin Lewis.
The Prime Minister personally invites Ulster's leaders to security talks at Number 10. He says that after the latest killings, politicians must lead the search for peace. An inquiry into why almost 1,000 cancer patients were given the wrong doses of radiation. And the stolen document that led to Paddy Ashdown's confession. A man is arrested. Good evening. John Major stepped into the maelstrom of Ulster politics today with an invitation to the leaders of the province's 4 main political parties. He invited them to join him and the Northern Ireland Secretary Peter Brooke in talks to try to stop the indiscriminate terrorist massacres which have reached a new intensity in recent weeks. The initiative was welcomed by Labour's Ulster spokesman Kevin McNamara. It will be the first time for 16 years that a British Prime Minister has personally taken part in such discussions. Our political editor, John Cole, reports.
John Major's talks on security next week face one huge problem. His government's perception of the reality of terrorism in Ulster conflicts sharply with that of politicians who live there. He knows unionists believe escalating violence can only be stemmed by internment of those who run paramilitary organisations. But at question time, he irritated them by endorsing the importance of the political talks which recently broke down.
Does he really believe that if the politicians in Northern Ireland at this moment were sitting at a table, that the awful atrocities that we have witnessed in the past few days would not be taking place?
The Prime Minister's talks next week will concentrate on security, but he repeated his belief that Ulster politicians should talk together about peace. Mr Paisley retorted that Westminster had taken charge of security 20 years ago, so it must not blame Ulster politicians for its failures. A senior Tory sounded a solemn note.
The province is quite close to sliding into civil war between the communities, and if so, the security forces will find it difficult to hold the ring between.
Did the authorities know who the godfathers were, and why did they reject internment?
Yes, of course it is the case that a significant number of those engaged in terrorism are known to the security forces, but it is also worth remarking that between 40 and 50% of those who are charged with terrorist crimes have no previous terrorist traces.
A Nationalist MP addressed the terrorists directly.
Nothing will ever be achieved through violence except the suffering that they have heaped on Northern Ireland. Have they the courage to call it off?
The Prime Minister will take the Ulster Party leaders into his confidence about changes in security. But mostly he'll just listen, because it's their constituents who are being killed in increasing numbers. So far, Whitehall is saying that the drastic breakdown in public order which would justify internment is far off. But Peter Brooke also reminded MPs today that its introduction requires surprise.
The loyalist paramilitary group, the Ulster Defence Association, has said the IRA's attacks against Protestants must stop if the cycle of violence in Northern Ireland is to be broken. The UDA said that if the IRA held back, then the outlawed Ulster freedom fighters would not carry out attacks such as yesterday's at a Belfast bookmaker's in which 5 people were murdered.
Security hasn't been as heavy in Belfast for years, but extra anti-terrorist measures put in place yesterday morning couldn't stop the indiscriminate attack on the betting shop. The local community, like many others in the city, is very frightened. Through the day, more and more flowers were placed there, and 5 candles were put on the doorstep in memory of the murdered relatives, neighbours and friends. The family of 51-year-old Christopher Doherty, like many relatives of the other victims, can't forgive the killers.
Hell will never befall to their enemy. That's all I can say. I say goodbye.
What's your reaction to the fact that some people might feel that there needs to be some sort of retaliation for yesterday's...
Well, I wouldn't want any retaliation. Although it's been said, there's a lot of people who say that, and they're not. These people don't listen to anybody. They just go ahead. But I wouldn't want anybody to same thing to happen to them as happened to him.
The murders were carried out by the illegal loyalist group, the Ulster Freedom Fighters. For many, they're so close to the legal Ulster Defence Association that, as one nationalist politician said, they're the same men in different balaclavas. The UDA's leadership has been transformed in recent years. The old guard either dead, in prison or expelled by the new men. They're younger, more violent and determined to show they can hit back. The BBC questioned a spokesman for the UDA leadership today. He refused to appear on camera and said he couldn't speak on behalf of the UFF. But he said that if what he called the IRA's genocide against the Protestant community was to stop, then he said he could not see circumstances in which the UFF would carry out attacks anywhere. The paramilitary spokesman repeatedly quoted the murder by the IRA of 8 workmen near Cookstown last month as the kind of attack that he said has brought the Protestant community to breaking point. An IRA statement today claimed it would not be drawn into sectarian killings. In other words, they don't see the murder of these 8 Protestants as sectarian, rather, as the statement said, as part of a war with British forces. They want people to think their campaign's different, not to the view of the bereaved or of the community at large. IRA attacks will continue, retaliation inevitable, an apparently unbreakable cycle of revenge.
Albert Reynolds has been elected to succeed Charles Haughey as Prime Minister of the Irish Republic. Mr. Reynolds condemned yesterday's killings in Belfast as dreadful carnage and said he would work with the British government to try to end the cruelty of the conflict. Jim Dougal reports from Dublin.
This was Albert Reynolds' day, but for him, yesterday's killings in Belfast cast a shadow over the celebrations. The murders, he said, were the result of a twisted patriotism which sees death as the instrument of change.
Is that cruel carnage that has taken place over the last 36 hours must have shocked every decent Irish person, man or woman, and that we should not spare any effort to look in every direction, to take any possible initiative or move to try and put a stop to a situation where we had 27 deaths in the last 36 days. That cannot be ignored.
One of his first actions as Prime Minister, he said, will be to seek urgent talks with John Major. Earlier, on his last day as party leader, Charles Haughey also spoke of the need for a response.
That we expect the British authorities to take every possible measure open to them, take all the steps available to them within the law.
It's obvious from Mr. Reynolds' comments that his government will see the security situation in Northern Ireland as a major priority. There's no question but that this will be welcomed by the authorities in Belfast and London. Jim Dougal, BBC News, Dublin.
A hospital in Stoke-on-Trent has admitted giving the wrong treatment to nearly